Well, the former Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, Ramesh Thakur, has written an extraordinary piece where he says that Western societies are struggling to confront the reality of tough decisions that have to be made to protect our very freedom that we enjoy so much. Ramesh Thakur joins me now. Thank you so much for your time. It's wonderful to have you on the program. This really is a stunning and a piece that you've written where you absolutely smash many of the groups that we're seeing protest around the world right now. Why do you think the West has lost the ability to confront tough choices when it comes to the war in Israel?
That's a very good question. I don't know. I mean, I think, have lost the capacity for clear moral thinking and clear understanding of what we need as a moral compass in order to survive and thrive as a society. And groups that come to our shores and settle in our countries, running away from problems and hatreds at home, some of them, unfortunately, import their conflicts and hatreds onto our soil and jeopardize the very tolerance and inclusion and freedoms that has given them the opportunity to enjoy a much better and different life that they're fleeing from. That, in their case, I can understand. It's harder for me to puzzle out why we have lost the capacity to understand the threat to our tolerance and our liberalism that is posed by groups that openly practice and preach their brand of illiberal intolerance. The return of anti-Semitism in the guise of anti-colonialism has been a shock. Now, I come from a background and a culture that, to my knowledge, has never had a problem of anti-Semitism. The only time that I can remember in Indian history when Jews were targeted was when Mumbai was under attack from Pakistan terrorists in 2008 or 2009, whichever it was. I think it was 2008. And Kabad House in Bombay was under threat.
Now, you were at the United Nations. I want to ask you about what you think of the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres' comment that implied that there was a justification for Hamas committing those terror attacks on Israel. Why do you think the United Nations and other groups, even the Greens, are trying to rationalize, contextualize these terror attacks instead of just condemning them for what they are, a cruel slaughter and massacre?
I think there is a false equivalence that results in equivocation between recognizing Hamas for what it is, which is a death cult, not interested in reconciliation with Israel, not interested in peace with Israel, but an explicit charter commitment to the eradication of Israel as a state, to the extermination of Jews, or if not the extermination, their ethnic cleansing from the region. Let's be clear. That's what that slogan, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free, means. It means either the extermination and or the expulsion, the ethnic cleansing of Jews from the whole region. And when you confront people with the logic of what they're saying, then they tend to react with a bit of shock and silence. But that's what it means. I think the time for inquiries about what went wrong in the security side and the defensive side on 7th October, and where we go from here in terms of looking for a way forward and out of this crisis, will come later. For the moment, I think it is not possible for Israel and Hamas to coexist, where Israel tries to minimize civilian casualties and avoid them if at all possible. Hamas explicitly aims to maximize civilian casualties, both amongst Israelis, but also amongst his own people, because it's a political tactic to inflame the Arab street, to inflame anti-Muslim sentiment around the world, and to mobilize anti-Israeli sentiment. So we need to recognize that clearly and support Israel in the effort to finish off Hamas as a threat, both to Palestinians and to Israel.
Ramesh, the United Nations, of course, helped in the very formation of Israel after the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. Do you think the United Nations has now lost its way?
Well, the United Nations is a microcosm of the full international community that has grown far more diverse than was the case when the United Nations was founded and when Israel was set up. There is a lot more, uh, there are far more countries today that reflect what was a minority opinion at the time that the UN committee recommended the creation of Israel. So, in that sense, it's reflecting that already. But as I said, those are different issues. It's possible to retain support for Palestine, to retain support for Palestine as a state, to criticize the Israeli policy. But I think the danger is too many people have now conflated that with anti-Semitism and calls for the extermination of Jews. I did not believe in my lifetime I would see on the streets of Sydney hear chants or cast the Jews. That
No.
should be a crime. People who are there and engaged in the chant should be identified and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And if the law permits, I would actually like them deported.
Yeah, yeah, no, very strong comments there. Ramesh, you wrote this amazing piece in the Fin Review. You were overseas for the past couple of weeks since you wrote it, but you have a line in there that says progressives who attack women's rights advocates as Nazis guilty of transgender genocide then go on to celebrate the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. Very quickly, have the left just completely got themselves muddled up in their morals here?
Absolutely. If Israel was to release the 43 minutes of raw footage it has compiled for public consumption, I think every Australian, and in particular these groups, should be made to watch that and then be asked the same question at the end of that. I doubt very many of them would be able to survive the 43 minutes without reaching or without just breaking down in tears.
All right, Ramesh Thakur, thank you so much for your time. Ramesh, a former United Nations official.